right. I think we have reached the appointed hour, and I'm sure folks will still continue to join us. But I wanted to kick off our first virtual Do Good Salon. And I think most of you who are in attendance know something about the Do Good Fund, but for prosperity purposes, I wanted to let everybody know that the Do Good Fund is a Columbus, Georgia-based public charity. And since its founding in 2012, the fund has focused on building a museum quality collection of photographs taken in the American South since World War II. I'm Alan Rothschild, one of the founders of the Do Good Fund, and appreciate both our guests being with us, but also each of you for joining us for this conversation. If you're like me, you don't know what day of the week it is. Every day feels like a Monday this short week, and thank goodness there's only one more day to get through and we can reset over the weekend. As part of our mission, we're not just collecting photographs, but we're also trying to get photographs, stories about the photographs, conversations about the photographs, and about the South to a broad audience. And when the collection relocated in the fall of 2019 to a larger space, the fall of, 2019, is that right? I need our experts with me. We realized that we had both some wall space that could be used as a gallery, as well as a beautiful area to host intimate events. And right now we have a show up called Documenting the South that features work by our guest, Sheila Pree Bright, but also images by North Carolina photographer David Simonton, Mississippian Don Norris, and Magnum photographer and University of Texas faculty member Eli Reed. This show should be up through the end of October, we think, and it's open by appointment. We've got our COVID hours, but anybody that's listening that's in Columbus would like to see it, just shoot us an email and we'll make sure you have an opportunity to do so. In addition to the gallery space, we started some casual evening conversations that we called the Do Good Salon. And we've invited a number of photographers and other creatives that are thinking about and working in the South to join us for very intimate conversations of around 20 guests each time to talk about whatever was of interest to them. The variety of the people who have spoken over the last year include Andre Gallant, who's a writer based in Athens. We had Austin, Texas-based songwriter Amy Bobrick, who was doing some work on Carson McCullers in Columbus, join us. Nashville, Tennessee photographer Christine Potter. And we had just kicked off our 2020 series when COVID hit, but we were very fortunate that another Magnum photographer, Carolyn Drake, was able to join us before we had to discontinue our in-person conversations. With no end in sight, we got very antsy and wanted to continue with our programming. And so we decided to jump in to Zoom. I think we may be the last organization to get here, and hopefully we've figured it out for tonight's talk. But thank everybody for joining us for this hour of casual conversation. We're sorry that we can't gather in person, but if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box and send that along. That's enough about the Do Good Fund. We're going to turn to who's really important tonight. And that's our guest, Sheila Pree Bright. Sheila is an internationally known photographer based just up the road in Atlanta. Sheila, we first became aware of your work through one of your great champions, Annette Cohn-Skelton, who's the director of the Museum of Contemporary Art of Georgia. She's extremely passionate about your work and was very encouraging about us getting to know it and adding it to the collection. We were able to do so last year and are pleased to both have the work in the collection, to have it part of the current show, and Sheila, to welcome you today to join us as our first virtual salon guest. Thanks for joining us. And, as I told you, I think there's no better place to start than to start at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about yourself and life before the camera was your ever-present companion.
Hold on for one. I got to share the screen.
Sure.
Okay. on the screen. Do you see? Okay, hold on.
Yes, we got the deck and we've got the image.
First of all, I want to thank the Do Good Fund for giving me the opportunity to speak. And also, I would like to thank you, Alan, too, for your dedication with photography and how you're trying to bring it to a different level with diversity and everything. So thank you for that. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to first talk about who I am as a person and how I started in photography. I'm actually a self-taught photographer in the beginning. Very shy, very introverted, believe it or not. I'm a daughter of a soldier. My early years was I lived in Germany up until the time I was 6 years old. And so I think with that experience, because my father kept us in museums, he just took us there. We didn't know what we were looking at. And I'm seeing these 18th, 19th century portraits of people that didn't look like me. And I think as a child, I was very, very curious because living in Germany, even though we were on an army base, when we would drive on the train, people wanted to touch our hair and our skin. And my mother allowed them to do it. But as a child, you really don't know what's going on. But looking back at all of that, it really informs me who I am as a person and why I do the work that I do. And this first image that you see is an image that I took last year before COVID. And what drew me to this image, because my early years when I graduated from in Missouri, the University of Missouri, I did not major in photography. I bought a camera my last year, and back then it was actually film. And that allowed me to speak because I would not be social with people or anything like that. And I took a photography course, and that really opened up my world. And I started in the late 90s photographing hip hop culture. So this image that you see right now, it says Lonnie's Hood, rest in peace, and it has that crown on it. And I was so engaged with that, I jumped out of the car and took the photograph because it brought me back to when I first started in photography as self-taught. And living on an army base, there's a lot of things that we couldn't do because if we did, my father would get in trouble. And so the MPs, the military police, would come to my father's house, which never happened, but we were very astute like that. We know we couldn't do anything to get my father in trouble. So when I left college, I went to Houston, Texas. That's where my older brother was living. And I was really curious about hip hop because I didn't grow up around a lot of Blacks, to be honest with you. It was more diversity. And I wanted to know what was going on with hip hop culture. And at that time, what was very prominent was gangster rap. So I would go into the neighborhoods, didn't know anybody, and told everybody I was a photographer. One camera, one lens. And I engaged. And I started photographing what they call promotional photos. It was in black and white. And you see this image before you. It says Lakewood. And I met this young man. Well, we were peers. And he asked me to come over to the house to take a photograph of his people that he was representing, to put out. And so I said, well, why do you want me to come over to your house? And he said, I just want you to come over. So when they came out with their, AKA, I don't know if you call them back then, 47s, and this young man came out on white and he was praying, I asked them, were these real guns? And they looked at me and they told me, they looked back and they said, wow, they said, you're like a white girl in a black body. Where did you come from? So that was my beginning into the hip hop culture, and especially in gangster rap, because I feel that gangster rap or hip hop culture was the CNN, was the voice of the people back then. Back then, they were talking about police brutality, what was going on in the neighborhood. And this image that you see before me is Class C. He had me out. I took photographs for his cover, and it was a last frame on my camera. And I didn't know what to do, so I told him to point the gun at me. He said, you want me to point the gun at you? And I'm like, yes. And he pointed that gun at me and went like this, and I took the photograph. This was my, oh, I'm sorry. This was my introduction into the art world. A friend of mine that was an artist saw my work of these portraits that were in black and white. And he said, Sheila, you need to be in a show. I didn't know anything about galleries or a show. And he says, I'm bringing a curator over. So he brought the curator over. And when he saw this work that I have of the portraits of these Black males, he said, I thought you was gonna just have fashion shots. He said, you took those photographs? And I'm like, yes. And so my first show was in Houston, Texas, with 3 other women that had received their MFA. Keeping in mind, I didn't know anything about MFAs or anything like that. So what I did was this. I went and got to a retail store. Back then, everybody was buying the tennis shoes, Jordan tennis shoes. So I went and got boxes from the Jordan tennis shoes, and I sprayed them all black on the inside and the outside, and placed these images into the shoebox and hung it up. So, and at the time, I didn't realize that I was being conceptual with that. So I wanted the viewer to really engage with the image, so they would have to go close into the image and look into the image. And the curator called me. He said, Sheila, they have the show. He says, you need to come down. And I said, I don't need to come down. I said, a picture speaks for itself. I don't like to talk. I don't like to talk to people. And so he begged me. He said, would you please come? So when I got there, at the door, people were at the door, wanted to talk to me, and that makes me very, very nervous. And one thing that they asked me, did he have a bullet in the gun? And I said, I don't know. I was off the photograph. So that was my introduction into learning photography and into the art world. So I left Houston, Texas, and was heading to California with my boyfriend. Now he's my husband. We were heading up to California. My sister called me, and my aunt had passed, so we came all the way to Atlanta. And that's how I got to Atlanta. And that was like late 1999. And my father, who is, he's been a great foundation in my life. He looked at my work and he says, you need to go to school. He says, you like to take photographs. So he put me through school at Georgia State, and I received my MFA. And I'm glad that I went, because the MFA program didn't teach me about anything technical or anything like that, but it made me understand how this imagery that I was taking of Black bodies, I didn't realize how the Black body was so political, okay? And so the school, when I went, I learned about all that. I learned how to talk, about how to talk conceptually about the work and what I was looking at. Because, you know, quite frankly, we live in a visual culture, and it's about learning how to read imagery. And I've been really thinking about that a lot, and later on I'll talk about that. But this image right here, I'm gonna go through real fast about the bodies of work that I've done before I go to my recent work that I I've done. But this is an image of me and my hair, and this was taken like in 2000, and I was talking about our Black hair, you know, because that's a big issue now, and it's always been an issue about how we wear our hair. But on top of that, I was thinking about women of color and what is the ideal beauty of standard? Who dictates that, you know? And we live in Western culture, and what dictate that, I started looking at the Barbie doll, was the Barbie doll, because of the iconicness of it and how mostly every woman has played with a Barbie doll. And to me, that's part of assimilation into the culture. So when I was in school, this work was done actually when I was in school. I started morphing girls with Barbie dolls, and it was especially women of color. And I was talking about blurring the lines between reality and non-reality, because Black bodies, people of color, they cannot fit what you call the ideal standard of beauty when it comes to Western culture. So I was really engaged with this artist, Hannah Hott, in the data movement, and she was a woman, and how she collaged everything. But this work was done actually in Adobe Photoshop, and I actually photographed this girl, and I put dreads on her, and it says 1999 Mattel Indonesia. And from there, I started, I was thinking about a lot of stuff. When it comes to the media, when it comes to Black culture, what's so prevalent in the media is marginalized communities. And when I came to Atlanta, there's large communities of African Americans that live in suburbia. And in between that time, because this work was done in 2006 to 2007 or 2005, I wanted to really point my camera to culture in suburbia, and they happen to be Black. And this is when I became nationally on the scene, was with this body of work. I call it suburbia. And the reason why I call it suburbia, I'm always trying to look at the universal commonality amongst all of us instead of us individually so. But what I soon realized with this work, I felt that this work right here is very important to me, because when I won this award, I had to go and speak before 300 people. And actually, I had to have curators, photo editors, gallery owners look at the work to give me what they thought about it. And I'm telling you, it blew me away. We lived in the 21st century. I was told that I did not have enough signifiers in this work to show that these were Black homes. Why did I call it suburbia? And when they saw this image, they read, they don't watch TV. I was so blown away with that, with this body of work. And so that's what I'm always trying to do, is challenge the perception and try to rethink and rewire our brains of how we look and see at imagery. 3 generations of women, the grandmother, you might not can see it real good, the grandmother, and the mirror image is a young girl, and then you have the dolls and stuff with that. So moving forward, my mind is always constantly going, and I'm always interested in individuals and communities that are often unseen. And I started right after suburbia, I said, Generation Y. A lot of people were talking about Generation Y, how they were not interested in politics. All they want to do is play on the phone, da, 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 da. And I'm like, no, there's something more to it than that. And that was around about the time that President Obama was actually thinking about running for office. And I really wanted to know what young people thought about America, because they are going to carry on the burden of of America. you know, they have to take it on. It's like the baton passing to them. And so I photographed young people from 18 to 25. I didn't tell them what to do. They decided what they wanted to do, and they made a statement. And I'm telling you, it was, I only have 2 images. These are 2 women. I photographed this in California, and they were talking about united we stand, divided. What is that quote that they had? United we stand, divided we fall. And it was interesting to see different diversity of people, how they felt about the American flag. And this is Tyra. I photographed her in Connecticut, and she talked about how when she came to me, and keep in mind, I don't really know them, engage. A lot of the people that I found was either I would go into the malls and tell them, look, I'm doing this work. Do you want to talk about America? And you know what? They would, you know, a lot of the young people say, nobody's never asked us that. So she came to my studio. Her mother dropped her off, and she was really frustrated. And before I go and photograph them, I sit down and we just have conversation and talk. And she told me that her mother asked her what she wanted to do. She wanted to do a noose. Her mother talked her out of it. And so this is what the image that you see, she decided to do this, and she's talking about how politics and people are keeping that generation silent. And I thought this was more powerful than the news, than anything. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my father, because I'm getting ready to go into my body of work. My mother and father grew up in a little town called Waycross, Georgia, which is 4 hours away from Atlanta. And they grew up around the Jim Crow era. And my father, based on what my mother has told me, is that they had to get him out of that town because when he saw wrong, he spoke up. He didn't care if you were white or anything. And that's what got him into trouble, because they were going to lynch him. So they got him out of Waycross, and that's how he actually got into the service, a serviceman. He served in the Vietnam War, and he served his country. And my father, I know as a child, and every 2 to 3 years that we would move, I always saw my father in his military clothes and like upright, you know. But something about him as a child, you don't really understand. Something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. But now as I got older, it was him experiencing racism, you know, from little town Waycross, Georgia, and now he's in the service. And I was thinking about how my mother and father were young people. They were like 18 or 20 years old. They experienced the white and the black signs, 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. This image right here is the funeral after the little 4 girls in Birmingham. They bombed the church. These are mothers and these are aunts. And I start really thinking about trauma, about imagining their trauma and generational trauma with that. And so moving forward with that, last year, I'm kind of all over the place, but it's going to come together, everybody, okay? Last year, I was asked by the Washington Post to do a piece about racism. And quite frankly, I was really tired of talking about racism, because I, as an artist, I'm challenging myself and asking myself, what am I doing? How am I elevating this? Or am I really helping this? Is my art really bringing about change, like the power of an image? So what I proceeded to do for the Washington Post is to talk about racism through landscape. And this is Stone Mountain Park. And I don't know if a lot of people are probably familiar with Stone Mountain Park. It was the second coming of the KKK in 1915, where they went up on this mountain, which is the largest granite in the country. And today, I believe 4 million people visit that park. They still have the Confederate flag up and the Confederate soldier. But I really want to talk about the root of racism through landscape. So this is some of the work that I wanted to make it look beautiful. I wanted to engage you with this, but I really wanted to bring in, because these, you know, these tablets don't do images good at all, but just these images like large print, and for you to walk into it is for you. What I like to do with my work is for you to come in to engage and let's start a conversation about it. And they use in the Bible has always been used to control people. And so this is, and so what was really interesting about this is my father's Bible. I went up on top of that mountain. I did a lot of research about the KKK that I did not have knowledge of. I did not realize that 90% of the members were Protestants, okay? And it was from the North and the South. It wasn't just the South, it was the North too. But through the media, it's always saying it's the South, but it was the North and South, but it was shaped in different shapes and form. And so with the Bible, when the second rising of the KKK came in 1915, they had the Bible and they read Romans chapter 12. And I'm telling you, when I laid that Bible down, positioned my camera, the page flew open to Romans chapter 12. And I call that work Invisible Empire. And that was actually done in last year. But I wanted to show you the connection of my father, Jim Crow law, the root of racism and how it started, you know, in Stone Mountain here, basically in the South. And now it's like we're going all the way back. Have we learned anything? 1960 now. When the death of Trayvon Martin happened, I really started thinking about young people again. And I said, it really takes young people to start a movement and to make things change. And so I wanted to know who some of the members were of the civil rights movement that we don't know anything about it. It's like my husband is a musician. It's like playing with an orchestra or a symphony. What it is, you have all these different parts that people are playing, and it's just not one head of it, it's all different parts of it. So I wanted to reach out to some of the members that I didn't even know that were in the movement. And I ran into Mr. Lonnie King, and this was right after Trayvon Martin because it was really heavy on my mind. So I went into the studio and started photographing these members of the civil rights movement. And I didn't tell you, Mr. Lonnie King started the Atlanta student movement. He was 23, and this is Dr. Rosalind Pope. At the age of 20, authored the Appeal for Human Rights. This was in Atlanta. They were on the HCBU campuses. And so I decided that I wanted to go to the ground because I wanted to know what was going on for myself as a Black person and as a woman. So I started meeting a lot of the young activists on the ground. And so I started photographing them too. This is Bree Newsom, who took down the Confederate flag. Kwame Rose in Baltimore. And along with that, I felt that it was important to bring in the protests. And what I wanted to do was show a different way, a different imagery versus what we see in the media. A lot of times in the media, most of the time, 99% of the time, we see images of Black males on top of cars with fire. It keeps projecting those stereotypes of Black folks. So I'm trying to capture moments with my imagery with 1960 now. This is Reclaim Martin Luther King. And I want to bring you in because I want you to engage, because I seen the pain, the hurt, the fear of being on the ground. And this image right here is in Stone Mountain. And it's very, if you didn't know anything about this image, it's very conflicted because you have the police officers in the back. You have this woman that is let me know if I'm talking too long and we gotta go, okay? Because I'll keep it moving. And you have this Black woman that's dressed up in Afro guard with her hair wrapped, but she's carrying that symbolism of the Confederate flag. So people's different ideologies will say the Confederacy, the white man, oh, she's with us, okay? But then when other people that are not of the culture that knows about this flag would be very upset with her. So I look at this as a very powerful image because it can be very conflicting. But at the moment when this happened, it was a lot going on in that mountain. And when I saw that image, I immediately took it, not really thinking much about it until after I saw the image and I found her. And she told me that she was claiming that flag because that flag is not doing anything to her. It doesn't mean anything to her. So it was about her claiming the flag. So I'm gonna go through these real quick. Yeah.
Well, and I would love for you to pause at that image for a second, Sheila. I was reading a New York Times article about your work recently, and it said that you document recent activism through the lens of history. And there are a couple of images in this series that quote resonated with me. You've got this group protest scene, and I think this was from 2015, 2016, with the Black Lives Matter protest in Atlanta. But you can see between the two signs enough letters to know that that's Ebenezer Baptist Church, Martin Luther King's home church, that they're walking past. And you can see the King sign up on the light post as well. The symbolism there and the connection between the protest of today and the folks that you photographed that had led the civil rights efforts in the 50s and 60s in Atlanta. It's a great connection there. Do you have any thoughts after interviewing and photographing folks and spending time with the BLM movement, the similarities and differences between the activists of the 60s and today?
Yes, actually this image is, I received a call from the activists saying that we're getting ready to shut down Martin Luther King Parade. This was, I believe, in 2015. And what was really interesting about this, you see Speak No Evil, you see Ebenezer Church where it says King 50 years. And these young people feel like they're fighting the same fights their grandparents and parents are fighting. And the reason why reclaim Martin Luther King Day is because they were tired of the commercialization of Martin Luther King. Because when Martin Luther King was alive, nobody liked him, okay? But now they have commercialized Martin Luther King, the romanticism of it, and they feel that they're reclaiming it because Martin Luther King was about resisting and moving forward with everything, and it seemed like everything stopped, and that was the whole purpose of that. And that's why this image is like Speak No Evil, and then all of these young men and women that are being shot down by police.
And that's sort of, well, and that's another image to me. I had to ask you about this one. When I fell in love with this image, it was the simplicity and the power of this raised fist. But when I was looking through our collection again the other day, I mean, isn't this Tommy Smith at the 1968 Olympics with this fist raised on the medal stand? And he's even got a U.S. Olympic jersey on or T-shirt on. Did that come to your mind when you took this picture?
On that ground and a lot of stuff is going on. You don't see that. I immediately saw when they were on their motorcycles, they came up. It was just a moment and raised his fist. And that's what I saw with that. Now, like I said, afterwards, yes, I saw that, but that is alluring and powerful because of Tommy Smith, because of the Olympics. Yes, with that. Yeah.
So tell me, before you get to your current 2020 images, I had another question for you, but I wanted you to finish.
No, I'm gonna just go through these because we might be running out of time. Yeah, and this is our John Lewis. One thing about John Lewis, and I speak generational, so is that Mr. King, who started the Atlanta student movement, told me this. He said when they took down the signs, the black and white signs, he said racism didn't go anywhere. He said we were on cruise control. And he faults them because they were on cruise control. John Lewis has always fighted the fight, and always, this is an image that I took in 2016 in Washington, D.C. with John Lewis. And I just think that speaks to the generation and generational. So is how he was been. I think about imagining his trauma, okay? And how he kept moving forward with everything. So I'm gonna go through this here. In this image, when I shoot, I'm waiting for moments. I'm not clicking my shutter on the camera, waiting for, oh, I'm trying to get this image. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for moments. I want you to feel these images. I want to show you a different side. You see a black male, he has tears coming down his eyes. You don't usually see that in protest images. I think
and that's what, you know, the human side of it that you've spoken about a couple of times this evening. Another thing that I see in looking through this work, you photograph a lot more women than the typical mainstream media image of these protests. Is that something intentional, or are there just a lot of females at these protests, or what?
Believe it or not, BLM started with 3 women, and the LGBTQ is really the force behind BLM, and it's a lot of women. It is a lot. They're the force. I say now that it's going to take women for the rebirth of America right now. Yeah. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, so when you and I first started talking in probably 2018 about acquiring some of the 1960 Now images for the collection, again, those pictures were taken, I think, in 2015 and 2016. Honestly, I thought that we were acquiring this documentation of a movement that maybe had peaked at 2015 and 2016, and obviously since George Floyd's death, it's clear that those images are just part of an early chapter in a story that's still being written today. In 2018, 2019, did you think the BLM protest had peaked, or did you sense that there was so much more to come?
Well, you know, I've been photographing the movement since Trayvon 2013. And when George Floyd happened, let me just say this, let me back up. Police brutality never did go anywhere. What it was with the BLM in 2017, they reorganized and wanted people to organize within the community because they were thinking about voting. It's just not about voting for the president. It's about voting with your local officials. And that's what was going on, but it never went anywhere at all. But when George Floyd happened, this is an image of a hologram of George Floyd that I took this year, COVID-19, that change.org actually projected a hologram on one of the, in DeKalb Market, where they taken down one of the Confederate monuments. and they place that image. But George Floyd is the second wave of BLM. And I think what makes this different, because globally so, we all saw the death of George Floyd and him crying out for his mother. And and we're living in COVID-19. I cried. It's like, how much more can we take of this? And it continues. We just had Jacob Blake, where he got them in the back. So this is the second wave, and I think that it brought more people together, just like back in the movement with Bloody Sunday with John Lewis. That's when more people started into the movement. You saw more diversity, and that's what happened with George Floyd. This is an image of the mothers after the death of George Floyd here in Atlanta. Their children were murdered by police here in Atlanta, and they held a press conference. Can you imagine their trauma, where they have to continue to relive this? This is another young man in Atlanta, Ray Shard, where he was killed by the police. And see, this is a different image right here. These are Black men that wanted to make a statement, and it was a silent march. And they were suited up like back in the day, in the 60s, and they marched from Ebenezer Church to Martin Luther King's birthplace. All this is new work that I have from what's, and this is one of the state representatives in Atlanta that was with the mothers when they held the press conference. So we're on a new surge with this. It's not going to go anywhere. And I, as an artist, a photographic artist, I ask myself, I go out, I photograph, I have a book, I travel internationally and nationally. Are we learning from this, or do we really want change? And this image right here is that I took last Friday. And what I'm experiencing on the ground versus what I'm experienced since 2013 is different. And it's different in a way because the police officers, I focus on the police officers, and they told all of the protesters, it was only about 100 people, asked them to get on the sidewalk. They got on the sidewalk and they marched. But yet and still, they grabbed 2 people out of there and grabbed them. And I do believe you had the military police there, the state patrollers. They had the guys with the bullet guns. And it was more of them to me out there than the protesters. And I do believe, and I don't know if we're really aware of what's going on, because what you see on the ground versus what you see on TV is kind of 2 different things. I do believe that we're going to go into a police state, that we're going to lose our freedom to do, to protest, because they were not doing anything, wrong with that. So that's been really heavily on my mind with these images that I photograph. And for some reason, I focus on this is one of the young men that they actually did. And they just very, very cocky. I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it, but something with my spirit with this work with the police officers. And I don't know if it's because the president is giving them this authority, and I just do believe it's gonna come a police state. But what I want to leave you with this, because we don't have that much time. Back in 2019, I actually was commissioned along with other artists in Atlanta to talk about civil rights then and now, the legacy. And it was with the NFL, and I did not realize it was with the NFL. And if I would have known it, I wouldn't have done that. That's when I found out about it. I was at the press conference and I was so upset. But people were calling me because they saw me on TV and they said, "You got this, because we know you're going to do a protest with them." But this image right here is by Richard Avedon. He was one of the mentors that I looked at, one of the photographers that I looked at when I went to school, because I was really interested in, I'm interested in people, and I like Richard Avedon portraits and how he took the photographs of people. And when I saw this image of Julian Bond and the snake in 1963 and holding his 9-month-old daughter. And you know, SNCC was about voting, all of that. And this was taken in, Atlanta and Vine City. And I did not realize that Richard Avedon took imagery of civil rights leader, let alone took some images of protest images. And he did a body of work on mothers whose children were killed in the civil rights movement. And so when I saw this image, I said, I need to bring the mothers here whose children have fallen to police brutality. So I brought Tamir Rice, the young boy that had the little toy gun, Oscar Grant in California, which they did a movie on, and then Eric Garner's mother, I Can't Breathe, and the rest of the women were from Atlanta. That was an amazing experience for me, because I think you take off color. I think about mothers. Mothers are the foundation. They're the ones that give us birth. They're the ones that glue and hold the community together. And the woman in the middle with the glasses, the real older woman with the black top, that's Dr. Rosalind Pope, who authored the Appeal for Human Rights. And I brought them to Vine City in 2019 and wanted to recreate. That's how I came up with the concept of that image. And this is the mural that I did from then and now with that. And it's still up. It's up it's downtown Atlanta. If anybody ever come to Atlanta or in Atlanta, it's off of Pryor Street. It's right around the corner from the courthouse, the police station, and city council. So my focus is always on the idea that it is the people and the ordinary people who are force behind what is trending and popular. And I just hope, I know that I cannot, if I could say it like this, Mr. King told me this, you will never get the masses of the people. But if I can, through my work, help someone to understand better, then that satisfies me, because there is a lot of knowledge on all ends that we don't know about people at all. We know each other through the media, but not really, we don't. And there's a lot of fear on all sides of it. And I just wonder if this country will ever come together with that. And with that, do anybody have any questions?
Well, you can submit questions by typing them in, I think at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Real quickly, Sheila, if we wait to see if we have any questions submitted. I know that this body of work and the current protest have kept you busy. What do you have any other projects that you're working on besides this protest work? And do you have any dreams on the near horizon that you would like to turn your attention to?
I got a lot going on, but I will mention this, and I don't know if the High did. The High Museum has commissioned out 3 photographers every year, and called Picturing the South. Have you heard of that, Alan?
Yes, yes.
I'm one of the artists, and what I'm going to do is, since I photographed the landscapes at Stone Mountain, I'm going to challenge myself to photograph not Stone Mountain, landscapes in relationship to the land and the relationship to Black bodies. I want to look at what does liberation look like, and I want to do that through the landscapes. I don't know how I'm going to do it, y'all, but that's what my new body of work is. The protest is fine, but I want to elevate more about how we look at images and how we can rewire. When I say rewire our mind through visual, is about we're so trained to look at imagery in a certain way with media because for the most part, it's just like my suburbia work. It was like, you know, what is that about? You know, it's kind of like subdued or whatever, but we're not, if we, that triggers our mind, it doesn't stimulate you. So I'm challenging myself as an artist to bring this up to another level and talk about the land.
Well, we look forward to seeing what you come up with. I know that that will be a very engaging series when you get into it. I don't see any questions, so I want to thank our audience for joining us for our inaugural virtual salon. And Sheila, sincere thanks to you for being such a great guest. For those of you in the audience, our next virtual salon is scheduled for Thursday, October 1st. And we're featuring North Carolina photographer and filmmaker Julie Plattner, who's going to be discussing her work documenting white nationalism. Until then, y'all be well, be good, and go out and do good. Thanks so much, Sheila. We'll see y'all soon.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. Take care.